everyone, and welcome back to Plainest Pages to another poetry video. Today we're talking about An Easy Passage by Julia Kopas, and is today the day I admit that I apparently cannot count. Sometimes I make the notes on the poems and then I publish the notes for you already, and then I just wipe it out of my memory and forget that I haven't actually made the video, only released the notes. So thank you again for the reminder, and let's dive straight into the summary and analysis. An Easy Passage explores the contrast between a young girl who's stuck in a slightly silly, slightly amusing, very much according to her age situation, and she is contrasted to an older woman who works as a secretary and lives a potentially a very different life. The older woman could be interpreted as the girl, so in a parallel universe as the girl when she's older, when she's wiser, but it could also be a contrast between just this girl and a random other older woman to show the difference between the two and to show the difference between aging. As after all, the poem explores themes of identity, society, the passage of time mainly, and aging. So the young girl is actually sneaking into her own house, and there's a whole very surreal feel to this poem that gives it the feel of not being quite something real, almost like an adventure, almost like a story, almost like a memory really. And there is a very unique narrative voice which we're about to explore. It can be compared to My 9-Year-Old Self, History, Look We Have Coming to Dover, or potentially Material. A little bit about the structure before we start. The poem is actually written in one continual stanza, giving it a very flowing stream of consciousness feel. It reflects the freedom and the continuity of life, especially as a young girl who doesn't quite have the same responsibilities that an adult would, who doesn't have the same jobs, who doesn't have the same expectations on her. So this is someone who's enjoying life without any sort of the boundaries we adults acquire as life progresses, the sort of things we start to fear, like, oh, what if I fall? This is a girl who doesn't think of the consequences because she has never had to before. It's still a very young girl. And this is reflected in the structure because likewise, life has no set structure, life has no strict set of rules that we really impose on people other than the basic carry out your responsibilities. So for the young girl who hasn't quite learned what responsibilities she has yet, this is reflected in the structure. It's very free. She's given the leeway to do what she wants, and it also reflects how the young girl exactly views life ahead of her. She doesn't have any concrete plans, nor does she really have any realistic images of what to expect from the future. So because of this, we see that this is very much in the present, this is very much in the moment, just as the girl lives in the moment. Not the same way that an adult does, reminiscing and reflecting on the past all the time or wondering about what the future may hold. And the structure of the poem is free verse, again highlighting both the uncertainty and also in a way the freedom. There's a lack of order, and I think that in particular because this girl is still a child, but she's on the cusp of teenagehood, on the cusp of puberty, this uncertainty is certainly very prevalent because this is a time where young girls are still in their childhood and they don't want to still be in their childhood, they want to become an adult, but there is also a lot of anxiety and nervousness towards what it is going to be like to become a teenager, to live in a completely different world, and then to become an adult, because teenagehood seems so far away until it isn't. And it's the same with adulthood. Kopas is really taking us on a journey through time and through the stages of a young girl's life, but I think that this is a poem that not only young girls of course can empathize with, but really anyone who has experienced those same feelings of worrying about puberty and adolescence and entering the adult world. And because this is such a journey that Kopas is taking us, this is mirrored in the journey that the girl experiences and in the title of the poem, An Easy Passage, because of course this is far from being an easy passage. In fact, it's a passage fraught with its own difficulties. It's a very ironic title, and I think that in this way the poet is highlighting how people have this view that, oh, growing up when you're a child is so easy. Like, you're still a teenager, you don't have any of the same adult responsibilities. But for anyone, aging is quite stressful, especially that jump from child to teenagehood to adulthood. So I think Kobus is highlighting that it's not as easy as it seems. So I have split the long poem into several chunks so that it's more manageable, and let's start to read. So once she's halfway up there, crouched in her bikini, on the porch roof of her family's house, trembling, she knows that the one thing she must not do is to think of the narrow windowsill, the sharp drop of the stairwell. She must keep her mind on the friend with whom she's half in love and who is waiting for her on the blonde gravel somewhere beneath her. Keep her mind on her and on the fact of the open window, the flimsy, hole-punched aluminium lever, towards which in a moment she will reach with the length of her whole body, leaning into the warm flank of the house. Okay, so the poem beginning with the conjunction of once she's halfway there, it implies that there is a story before this narrative, that there is certainly a moment in which the girl and her friend have agreed that, yeah, it's worth it for you to make this absolutely insane journey and to prepare for a leap between your house. And there is a story that led to this girl's decision, but we do not know it. And so this is very reflective of how a lot of the times we only know a teenager's actions rather than the justification for it. I'm sure to the young girl it seemed like a very logical thing to do, to take this leap from the house. And it's highlighted that, well, actually, how can we think that we understand them when it definitely isn't an easy passage? They themselves may not fully understand, as well, if something were to happen, of course you would look back at this moment and go, wow, that's a stupid decision we're making. And this is also likely quite a spontaneous decision that she made with her friend, again reflecting the freedom and lack of constraint of this period in our lives. Her mom isn't here to control her, so off she goes, decision after decision, and she's sure it's the correct decision. The use of the possessive pronoun she here, it tells us that this is a girl, but we don't know actually that she is young. This is just an assumption that we make, likely because it's contrasted with the older woman, and also likely because, again, this isn't a very thought out decision, so we ourselves have connotations of children with slightly rash decisions, with a lot of bravery, with a lot of potentially foolish courage. So we make the assumption that she is young, perhaps also because of the attributive adjective halfway. She's halfway up her climb to the house, but she is also halfway there to growing up. She is halfway there to being being an adult. So she's caught between being both a child and an adult. She's somewhere in that gray zone that's the puberty period where she doesn't quite know. She is crouched. It also shows her small height and build, likely, but it also most of all shows us that actually she is scared. Now she's starting to think, oh, yeah, maybe this wasn't the correct decision, but also she can't back out because her friend is down there watching her. Her friend and the person who she is half in love with. The girl is, I think, very much desperate here to prove something to her peers. It's peer pressure, but it's also, I think, significant that it says that she's half in love with her, half in love because she looks up to her, because during this period we have like role models and people we want to imitate, but she is also half in love with her, potentially because this is the period where young girls and young boys in general start to like discover things about who they like and about their sexuality and start to feel like attraction in a way. So I think that in this way she's still like figuring out what she wants or who she wants to be, so that's why she looks up to her friend. It also shows that she is like still desperate to be older because she's wearing a bikini like the older woman, but she still likely has the body of a child since she's still slim enough and small enough to fit between this gap, to attempt this jump, to crouch for it. So she really is halfway between child and halfway between adult. And also, of course, she still lives in her family's home, so again, another clue as to her age that and why we make the assumptions that we make. So she does not fully belong there, and I think that this feeling of not fully belonging is quite particular to teenagers, that sense of alienation. She's trembling because she's scared to make the jump because of the sharp drop and the narrow windowsill. She's trying not to think about it, just like many teenagers avoid thinking about the things that they do, or really about the consequences of growing up and of becoming an adult and the new rules that come with growing up. She's trying not to think about the danger, she's trying to live spontaneously, she's trying to, in other words, act completely like her age and live like the youth do, live like you only live once. The imperative of must keep her mind, it shows how the girl is convincing herself of the certainty of her actions. The use of have for have in love, she really wants to grow up, she's set on it, and just by showing just how much she wants to grow up, I think it also emphasizes that she's not quite grown up yet. And the half symbolism is also highlighted by the oxymoron of blonde gravel. Of course, it's an impossibility because gravel is like the material you have on the ground. It's usually like black or dark gray, definitely not blonde because it's small pieces of stone. So this oxymoron, this impossibility, I think it shows the balance between two conversing ideas, two very different ideas, much like the girl is between childhood and adulthood, because childhood and adulthood are two extremely different periods in our life. The friend is also somewhere far below, and not only in terms of height, but also because the girl is really taking responsibility. So the girl is perhaps moving faster into adulthood. She's speeding things up by starting to make really grown-up, risky decisions. And at this point, we also begin to understand that actually she is breaking into her own home because she's very well aware of the layout of the window, and she wants to reach the flimsy lever and to lean into the open window. So she really has this insider information because after all, it is her home. The line ends with a full stop about 13 lines in, and this is significant later on in the poem, and this is sure break up the flow of the poem and the stream of consciousness. The asyndetic list also adds to the flow, and the materials described in general, like gravel for example, they're quite inflexible, and I think it's contrasted to the girl's youth and flexibility, the fact that she can crouch, the fact that she can really change the shape of her body still, she can easily accomplish her plan, whereas if she was older, of course it would be quite impossible. But first she steadies herself, still crouching. The grains of the asphalt hot beneath her toes and fingertips, a square of petrified beach, her tiny breasts rest lightly on her thighs. What can she know of the way the world admits us less and less the more we grow? So the girl gets ready to make the jump and she steadies herself. The grains of asphalt are hot beneath her toes. There's a metaphor of them being like a petrified beach. Petrified because they seem ready to scatter. The ground seems ready to give out under her. And the personification, it really represents the fear that the girl feels. And the beach also links to her wearing a bikini, likely because they're heading somewhere, maybe they forgot something, pretending she's on the beach, but also wanting to show off, wanting to start to wear adult things, to show off to her blonde friend. And the girl's youth is again contrasted with her wish to grow up, the fact that she's wearing a bikini, but she has tiny breasts. And I think Julia Copis's focus on this aspect of her body is again to highlight that actually during this period children begin to discover more things about both their body, which is changing because of puberty, and their sexuality, hence the links to her friend, and also hence the links to the changes in her body. Her youth is again shown in a pivotal rhetorical sentence that interrogates both her and the reader. What can she know of the way the world admits us less and less the more we grow? She doesn't yet know about the world being harsh, but we the reader do. It's again a suggestion that, well, actually she is young, and we can see the world visually evolving because the question is broken up. What can she know? Break of the way the world admits us less and less, break the more we grow. So it shows us that this certainty is like beginning to fracture because she is actually about to find out. She is about to enter the adult world. This enjambment as well, it helps the flow because we can really see the growth in the girl. Less and less, the repetition highlights how the world diminishes in feeling compared to the growing girl. So again, she's outgrowing the world, she's outgrowing these words, this sentence. The girl doesn't yet know this. For now, both girls seem lit, as if from within, her hair and the gold stud earrings in the first one's ears. For now, the long grey eye of the street, and far away from the mother who does not trust her daughter with a key. The workers about their business in the drab electroplating factory. Over the road, far too, most far, from the flush-faced secretary who, with her head full of the evening class she plans to take, or the trip of a lifetime, looks up now from the stirring omens of the astrology column at a girl, 13 if she's a day, standing in next to nothing in the driveway opposite, one hand flat on her against her stomach, one shielding her eyes to gaze up at a pale calf, a silver anklet, and the 5 neat, shimmering, oyster-painted toenails of an outstretched foot, which catch the sunlight briefly like the flash of ornaments before dropping gracefully into the shade of the house. For now, just a brief moment before they grow up, the girl seems to be lit from within. The first one's ears have gold earrings. So again, it highlights that they're trying to appear older, like the bikini, the golden earrings that they aspire to, but also earrings. Most people get their piercings when they're in adolescence or really, really early on as babies, but most often in their adolescence. So the fact that she's already gotten it shows that she's really beginning to take pride in her appearance, beginning to care more the way that an adult would. The road is personified as if the street is a hidden spy and the neighbors are observing them even now, but as soon as the girls are not observed, here they are suddenly free from social expectations. And this is what I'm talking about when I talk about, in general, the surreal feel of the poem. The fact that it's unclear who this woman is, that she's a neighbor, that she's a secretary, but it also seems like it could be the girl when she's older and she's looking at the house in which she grew up and just remembering what it was like. And we definitely see that it's not her mother who's somewhere far away working, who's already an adult. So it's kind of like the 3 transitional changes between the girl who we see, the secretary who might be the girl but slightly older, and the mother who is already a woman, who is already an adult, a grown-up, who's working, who's away somewhere with lots of responsibilities, which is why we can't see her. They are far from the mother who doesn't give her daughter a key. This is why the daughter is climbing, because potentially the mother thinks that she's irresponsible, and well, maybe if she's willing to make that leap, she is. The mother forbidding her, in fact, gives her more of a motive to break in. It's the teenage aspiration towards rebellion, really. So the workers far away in their drab clothes, they're boring, they're distant, just like the future for the girl. But of course, both we and the secretary know that the future is fast approaching. It may seem like you've been a child for so long and you're still going to be a child for eternity, but suddenly, bam, and you're an adult. So far to, most far from. The alliteration of F, it repeats the girl's desperation to get into the house, but also in a way to really win her mother's trust and to start to be treated like an adult, really. So the diacope doesn't really fit in with the narrative and everyday style of the poem so far, but perhaps Scopas uses it to highlight how the girl feels about her life in general, being far from adulthood, far from childhood. It's a very personal look at the girl's exact thoughts and feelings, of her motive towards why she's breaking into the house. It's not only because she wants to go out and party with her friend, it's because she wants to prove to her mother that she's capable of making these decisions on her own. The mother is especially far from the secretary, perhaps representing how the girl in her childhood is closer to youth and teenagehood and young adults than being a fully fledged adult. So the secretary has so many plans, this evening class, this trip of a lifetime. It's a metaphor perhaps for the still unaccomplished in the secretary's life. The kind of things we want to do when we're young, but somehow we never end up doing because we get bogged up with responsibilities and jobs and tasks, and suddenly you're not 20 anymore. And the way that the secretary as well looks up at the girl, 13 if she's a day, again highlighting that actually the girl is probably younger. It's hard to tell by someone's age. She could be younger, she could be older, but she is likely 13. And the secretary's look at the girl is very impersonal, which I think again suggests that actually it isn't the mother, it's somebody else, and perhaps it isn't even the girl. It really is just another woman who happens to be looking out of the window, who happens to be distracted from her work by an astrology column. She's wearing next to nothing. It's also a cliche. It's something that adults may say to children, like, oh, you should dress more appropriately, you're wearing next to nothing. Again, it highlights their difference in age, but it's more than a difference in age. It's a difference in mentality. It's a difference between well, children and teenagers and adolescents not really caring, and young adults as well, not caring what they're wearing because they're dressing for themselves still, or they're very comfortable and they have far less insecurities than perhaps adults do, which is why they go out like this. And then adults don't understand, or they think that they're being far less conservative than they would be. So these tiny little things in the poem really highlight how the poem is about aging and broader, more universal themes as a whole. So it's not just about this one girl, it's about girlhood and teenagehood in general. The calf is a body part, but it's also a baby cow, and it again highlights the girl's youth, the fact that, well, she's not really like a fully fledged cow yet. She's not like a properly grown adult who's capable of really making her own decisions. Even her body parts are still young. And pale, it also has connotations of not quite a lot of life force, so she's still young. She's not like rosy in the dawn of youth quite yet. She's still a child. And the immaturity is also contrasted to the silver anklet. It's quite an expensive material. It shows maturity. It shows that she's already beginning to look towards these expensive materials and wearing older things. So the girl is not quite tall yet to reach, but she flashes briefly in the sun. Let's go back to this idea of lit within. She's both lit within and lit from outside by the sun. She's lit within because she still has a lot of life force and a lot of energy and a lot of youth, really. She's still young. And she's lit from the outside because of the sun. She really embraces being out there, being in the open, chasing decisions rather than staying inside, bogged down by jobs and mundanity and everyday tasks that adults must carry out. She does, however, manage to get successfully into the house. She drops into the cool shade, the shelter, and the oxymoron of dropping gracefully, because usually dropping is like it falls, that's it breaks, it shatters. It shows how unlikely her journey was, but it highlights how in fact she made it. We as adults, our first instinct was to say, yeah, that's not a good idea, you're not gonna make it. But she was like, yeah, I can do it, I can go for it. And like, of course she was scared, but she still went for it. Again, it's a difference in mentality. It's a difference between being brave and slightly fearless for when you're young and when you're still a child, and the adult, overly rational, overly cautious look at things. So the narrative brings it back to the girl, and she's described as almost ethereal before her youth, before her innocence disappears. Although this journey is far from being an easy passage, and it's quite a perilous moment, that we should have confidence in our children, that we should really trust that we grew up and so will they, and we shouldn't really be overly condescending towards them or look down on them too much, because they will make it, and it's a natural process that everybody has to experience. So although we shouldn't really treat them the way that the girl's mother does and not even give them the keys, we should make steps towards explaining and helping them and guiding them, but really it's up to them, because that is a very individual journey. So that's what I take the meaning of the poem to be. I hope you enjoyed watching my summary and analysis. Thank you so much for making it this far, and I will see you soon.